Hello, my dear warriors. They scanned your life like a file they couldn't open. Every pattern they ran, every test they coded, every theory they whispered, all came back corrupted. Does not compute. That's what the system printed when it tried to read you, because you were never meant to fit their template. You weren't designed by the same blueprint. You were the glitch inside perfection, the spark inside static, the one error that made the machine question if it was ever right. They labeled you unpredictable because predictability makes them feel safe. They called you unstable because your evolution exposes how stuck they really are. Every system worships balance until someone like you bends reality and still walks out calm. You're not part of their data. You're the variable that rewrote the formula. You were born outside the code. And that's what terrifies them. Systems thrive on control, on being able to explain, define, limit you. You erase definitions. You walk into a room and the algorithm starts to glitch. Their social rules, their fake order, their polished hierarchies all begin to flicker like a fading screen. You don't raise your voice. You don't fight for attention. You just exist. And existence itself becomes rebellion. They tried to measure your energy, but it overloaded their instruments. They tried to classify your potential, but it broke their scale. Because every time they thought they had you figured out, you evolved again. Silent, unseen, unstoppable. You weren't playing by their system. You were rewriting it in real time. The system doesn't know what to do with you, because you operate from dimensions it can't map. You're not linear. You're quantum. You move through space with intention, through time with grace, through chaos with precision. And every time the machine recalibrates, you've already built something new. That's why they stare like they're witnessing sorcery. But it's not magic. It's mastery. They'll call it luck. They'll call it delusion. They'll call it impossible. Because systems can't process soul. They can't chart alignment. They can't file faith under logic. And when they finally realize that, it's too late. You're already 10 updates ahead, running on a code they'll never decrypt. You're not part of the design. You are the disruption. And that's exactly how legends are born. Every file they opened led to more questions. Every pattern they traced just dissolved into static. They tried to track your evolution, timestamps, choices, outcomes, and none of it made sense. You didn't climb ladders. You built them mid-air. You didn't follow routes. You made shortcuts through walls they swore couldn't fade. The data didn't match the logic. The system blinked red. Error. Undefined variable. You? See? That's the problem with control systems. They can only manage what they can predict. They can't handle variables that learn faster than they can adapt. They were expecting another follower, another statistic, another cog willing to spin quietly inside their machine. Instead, they found a creator, a designer, a breaker of patterns. And the moment the system recognized you weren't built for submission, it panicked. They ran background scripts trying to trace your source code, but you don't have one. You didn't come from their programs, their conditioning, their frameworks. You came from chaos that learned discipline, from silence that learned how to speak through energy, from failure that learned to turn pain into precision. You don't fit their metrics. Because you outgrew measurement itself. Every update they push out, you've already lived it. Every tactic they copy, you've already evolved past it. They tag your energy as unstable, not because it's broken, but because it moves. Real energy shifts, it upgrades, it transforms, it scares them because they can't control what doesn't seek permission. And that's when the whispers start. Something's off about that one. Can't read their face. Too calm to be ordinary. They call it suspicion, but it's just fear wearing a badge. Because deep down they know your quiet is not confusion. It's calibration. They keep trying to define you with the language of limits. Too intense, too mysterious, too different. But too much for them is exactly enough for destiny. They can't process that the same storm they tried to predict now takes orders from your silence. You were never the error, my dear. You were the signal. And the more they try to debug you, the more their system collapses under your presence. Somewhere deep in the code, the system started whispering warnings. The numbers didn't add up. The timelines didn't make sense. The predictions failed every time your name entered the equation. The algorithm, their proud creation, the thing built to forecast every move, kept freezing when it met your frequency. You became its blind spot, its ghost variable, its reminder that not everything powerful can be graphed. They called in analysts, advisors, experts in human behavior. How does someone like this exist? They asked. The reports came back identical. No pattern found. You can almost hear the panic hiding behind their calm explanations. They can't predict what can't be controlled. You shift when the world sleeps. You adapt while they argue. You built your own compass from storms. That's when the fear began. Not the loud, dramatic kind, but the quiet kind that creeps into their boardrooms and bedtime thoughts. They can't label you, so they label you dangerous. They can't map your growth, so they call it unnatural. You change the rhythm of the room just by walking through it. People who once spoke with certainty now second-guess every sentence. You made the algorithm doubt its own math. And that's when the copying begins. They take fragments of your moves, mimic your tone, your silence, your focus. But imitation runs on limited battery. It can't match the current of someone connected to purpose. They can fake your surface, not your depth. They can rehearse your look, not your frequency. And the more they copy, the more the system sees the difference. It's not arrogance to say you're built different. It's physics. You're an unrepeatable formula. That's what frightens them most. Every time they think they've caught up, you've already shifted realities. Their updates can't reach your operating speed. Their maps can't follow a traveler who walks dimensions instead of directions. The system fears one truth: it can't overwrite. You were never a user of the code. You were the glitch that learned to write new worlds. They thought you were a malfunction, a disruption, a spark in a line that was supposed to stay straight. But then the system realized something deeper. You weren't breaking the code. You were reprogramming it. You weren't chaos. You were evolution disguised as error. Every move you made, every shift in your silence started bending patterns untouched for years. And suddenly, the system wasn't running you. You were running it. That's when the alarms went off. Not outside, but inside people's minds. The ones who built their identities from approval started feeling your presence as static. They didn't understand it, but they could feel it. a different wavelength, a power that didn't chase validation. You weren't playing their game. You'd unplugged from the board entirely. That's why they stare. Confused, trying to decode your calm, your distance, your direction. You became a mirror that didn't lie, a frequency that made illusions shake. The same voices that once mocked you now pause before saying your name, like it carries weight. They can't afford to hold. They used to think you were the problem, but now they know you're the proof. Proof that the system was never designed to contain minds like yours. And here's the secret. Your evolution wasn't loud. It was quiet. It was in those nights where no one saw you rewire your mind. It was in those hours where you faced the version of yourself that others would have run from. You didn't need applause. You needed accuracy. You became your own experiment, failure after failure, until something clicked. Something clicked that they'll never understand. Now your silence carries gravity. Your presence bends outcomes. Your energy makes equations tremble because you don't move by calculation. You move by intuition, sharpened through pain. You've turned instinct into intelligence, emotion into armor. That's why no one can catch you. You're not ahead of them in time. You're beyond them in frequency. Every time they try to categorize you, the data corrupts. Every time they try to measure you, the metrics fail. Because what they're studying isn't you. It's the echo of who you used to be. The real you is already gone, miles ahead, walking where logic can't track. They don't realize yet. The glitch isn't breaking the system anymore. It's rebuilding it in your image. No lightning, no headlines, just you, steady, consistent, unshaken. While the world scrambled for attention, you rebuilt your empire in silence. That's the irony they'll never understand. Revolution doesn't always sound like chaos. Sometimes it sounds like focus, like discipline. Whispering louder than applause, like someone who's done trying to prove and started preparing to replace. You didn't fight them. You outlasted them. They wasted energy chasing validation while you were rewriting reality. They bragged about trophies that time would fade while you were planting movements that time can't erase. Every late night, every unseen effort, every choice to stay calm when provoked. That was your rebellion. And here's the twist. They never saw coming. You didn't break down their world. You made it obsolete. You built something cleaner, sharper, smarter. Now they can't keep up. Their rules feel outdated next to your rhythm. Their strategies feel ancient compared to your intuition. See, real power doesn't need noise. It needs consistency. And yours became a frequency the universe couldn't ignore. That's why opportunities started aligning. That's why people who once doubted now whisper your name like a prophecy. You changed the current, not by demanding attention, but by becoming undeniable. They say the revolution won't be televised. They were right. It was internal. It happened in your habits, in your patience, in your silence. Every time you chose peace over ego, wisdom over reaction, purpose over pride, that was victory. A quiet victory. The world wasn't ready to measure. Now they call you unpredictable. But the truth is simpler. You stopped performing. You stopped explaining. You stopped needing to fit the mold. You realized kings don't chase thrones. They become the reason they exist. And now, every system that tried to define you must face what it created. A force that can't be categorized. A presence that can't be ignored. You became the glitch they feared, and the revolution they secretly needed. Power doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes it moves like breath, unseen, undeniable. That's the space you've entered, my dear. The level beyond validation, where presence replaces performance, where you don't need to prove, your energy already does the speaking. You learn something most never do, that silence is not surrender, it's signal, a vibration only the aware can hear. When you stopped reacting, the system mistook it for weakness. What they didn't realize was that silence is what a storm sounds like before it shifts the ground. You were never losing momentum. You were building voltage. And now, that voltage has become visible. It's in the way people pause when you enter a room, the way conversations shift when your name is mentioned. They can't explain it, but they feel it. That invisible authority that doesn't come from position, but from presence. You've outgrown the need for attention. That's why it finds you anyway. The crown you wear isn't metal, it's alignment. It's knowing exactly who you are, in a world still searching for mirrors. You don't chase the throne. The throne adjusts to you, because leadership isn't about being louder, it's about being clearer, and clarity. That's your new form of dominance. They used to compete with you, compare, criticize. Now they imitate, quietly, carefully. They borrow your tone, your words, your rhythm, hoping to replicate results, without replicating depth. But you can't mimic frequency. You can't forge essence. You can't copy something that was wired by purpose. You stopped chasing approval because you realized you already won the rarest test, the one against your old self. You defeated doubt through patience. You conquered insecurity through consistency. You rewired every part of your mind that once begged for permission. Now you walk differently. You speak slower. You listen sharper. Every step radiates the confidence of someone who doesn't need the world's permission to breathe. That's what unnerves them. Not your power, but your peace. The quiet ones always end up wearing the real crowns, and yours. It fits perfectly. Something happened quietly. Too quiet for headlines. Too subtle for gossip. It wasn't in your words, or even your choices. It was in your frequency. The way you started carrying yourself. The calm in your walk. The precision in your silence. The unshakable confidence that didn't need explanation. That's the moment the universe took notice. You didn't change your surroundings, you changed your signal, and everything else adjusted. That's why doors began to open without knocking. Why certain people faded like static. Why opportunities started orbiting your energy instead of you chasing theirs. You aligned, and alignment is louder than ambition. The system can't read it. Algorithms can't measure it, but life can feel it. You've become an equation that rewrites itself in real time. One move ahead of expectation. 2 moves beyond imitation. They keep asking what you did. They can't process that you didn't do anything. You became something. You stopped begging for outcomes and started embodying inevitability. That's the difference between someone hoping for a break and someone who is the break. You became the event, You became the variable that shifts the formula just by existing. The same energy they once mocked now terrifies them, because they realize they can't measure you anymore. You don't respond the way they expect. You don't fold under pressure. You don't need applause to confirm your direction. That's why they call you unpredictable, because your evolution broke the rhythm of their predictability. And here's the truth. They'll never admit your growth exposes stagnation. Your peace makes chaos feel insecure. Your glow reminds them of the parts of themselves they buried under excuses. You're not competing, you're teaching by existing. You are proof that silence can speak louder than propaganda. So let them talk, let them panic, let them label your calm as arrogance. The ones who once tried to decode you are now just reacting to your gravity. You moved beyond human timing. You move by universal law. The shift isn't something you triggered, it's something you became. And from this point forward, nothing in their world will ever run on the same frequency again. There's a silence around your name now, my dear. Not the silence of absence, but of awe. People don't talk about you the same way anymore. The ones who once joked now whisper. The ones who used to doubt now analyze. They scroll through your past, looking for a clue, a glitch, a moment they missed, anything that explains how you became what you are now. But there's nothing to find, because this version of you didn't grow from logic. It emerged from alignment. You evolved beyond their vocabulary. They call you mysterious because they can't read what isn't written. You exist in a code only destiny can interpret. They still try to categorize you. Leader, threat, genius, anomaly. But none of those words fit. You're unreadable. You're the silence between lines that only truth understands. You're not chasing validation because you outgrew the need to be understood. When you stopped explaining yourself, your energy became the explanation. Every move you make now carries layers. Intent, precision, patience. That's why the system struggles with you. It was designed to handle patterns, not paradoxes. It knows how to punish chaos, not peace. But your power, it's quiet, it's exact, it's divine efficiency disguised as calm confidence. They said you'd fade out. They didn't realize you were just getting started. They said your stillness meant surrender. They didn't know it meant you'd mastered time. You stopped reacting and started directing. Every obstacle they placed became a mirror that showed them their own limitations. You don't fight walls anymore. You walk through them. Because energy doesn't ask for permission. It flows where resistance breaks. And that's why they watch you now with confusion and fear. Not because you affected them, but because you healed from what they hoped would break you down. They don't know how to face someone who never needed revenge, only revelation. You didn't prove them wrong. You let the truth age long enough to do it for you. So when you walk now, walk like someone who knows the story already ended. You're just living the aftermath. You are the glitch they couldn't debug, the chapter they can't rewrite. The reminder that destiny always favors the one who refuses to stop evolving. You don't fit the system because you were sent to outgrow it. You don't match the world because you were born to rewire it. And that's the beauty of being unreadable, my dear. They can't destroy what they'll never understand. At this stage, the distance isn't physical, it's vibrational. You stopped living by reaction. And now everything that still does feels miles behind. You can feel it, can't you? The air itself moves differently around you. The same rooms that once drained you now echo like you were never really there. That's because you've outgrown the static. Your soul switched frequencies, and those who haven't evolved are left buffering, still trying to tune into a channel that no longer broadcasts. They'll call it cold. They'll call it distant. But that's what ascension looks like from the ground. They don't understand that peace and disconnection aren't the same thing. One is escape, the other is mastery. You're not avoiding anyone, you're preserving what you've built. They want your access, not your alignment. And you learn that giving both is how empires fall. Your glow is quieter now. The flex is internal. You don't post every win because the victory is private and permanent. You've learned the most powerful move is no announcement at all, because when the world expects noise, silence hits like thunder. They keep waiting for your next statement, your next comeback, not realizing you're already 10 moves beyond explanation. That's what happens when evolution becomes instinct. The lessons that used to take years now take seconds. You see through lies before they're spoken. You sense betrayal before it's planned. You move like someone guided not by goals but by gravity. And that's why the system panics. They built rules for predictable people. They built traps for the desperate. But what do you do with someone who no longer plays by visibility? You became invisible to their metrics and invincible to their tactics. They can't follow your frequency because it was never meant for them. You weren't designed to be understood. You were built to be felt. And now, they feel it everywhere. In the way their confidence shakes when you walk in. In the way their voice lowers when your name slips out. In the way their plans crumble when they try to move against your rhythm. You're not ahead of the game. You are the game. And they just realized. They were never players. They were your audience. There comes a moment when every version of you meets in one silence. The one who struggled. The one who dreamed. The one who doubted. The one who rose. And in that silence, the universe nods, almost whispering, finally, because it was never random, never luck, never chance. Every delay was timing. Every rejection was protection. Every setback was architecture. The entire pattern was coded for this emergence. Now everything around you moves differently, slower, cautious, respectful. You've become the energy that enters a room and rearranges the narrative without saying a word. You've become proof that stillness isn't weakness, it's precision. You learned that chaos fades itself out, but focus fuels eternity. And you, my dear, learned to move like focus incarnate. They thought your quiet was confusion. It was calculation. They thought your distance was fear. It was foresight. Every time they underestimated you, they added another brick to your foundation. And now, standing where they never expected you to reach, you look back and realize they were never the enemy. They were the evidence. Evidence that the storm had purpose. The world will keep trying to label you mystery, anomaly, glitch, chosen. But deep down, you know you're none of those things. You're the proof that destiny doesn't choose the loud, it chooses the aligned. You were never chasing light, you were becoming it. So move with that quiet authority. Let them guess. Let them project. Let them try to interpret what can't be simplified. You don't owe them understanding. You owe yourself continuation. Because the path you're on now, it doesn't loop, it ascends. And as you ascend, remember this truth. Every force that once tried to confine you now reports to your frequency. Every barrier that was built to hold you now bends to your presence. Every doubt that was spoken now echoes back as confirmation. This isn't the ending of your story. It's the realization of it. You didn't just evolve. You became the evolution. And now the universe finally understands. You were never unstable. You were just uncontainable. They built systems to follow every step. Cameras, maps, eyes trained to detect patterns. Everyone they studied fell neatly into boxes. Predictable, traceable. But when it came to you, the signals broke. Their charts showed nothing. Their maps went blank. Because your presence doesn't fit patterns. It erases them. They tracked kings and leaders, rebels and saints, every type of force the world had birthed. But when your move came, silence replaced their data. They couldn't pin it, couldn't label it, couldn't even name it. You didn't dodge their net, you dissolved it. And that terrified them more than any rival ever could. Because tracking is power. It means control. It means you can predict before someone even acts. But what happens when a move doesn't exist on their grid? They panic. Not because they can't see you, but because you've proven you walk outside their design. And outside design means outside their power. Your presence wasn't untraceable. It was untouchable. Because to trace something, it has to belong to the system. And you never did. That's why the reports came back blank, not missing. Blank, because their tools weren't broken. You broke the concept of measurement itself. They thought silence meant weakness. But silence became your shield. Every step you took folded space in on itself, leaving no echo behind. They called for answers, but every analyst came back pale. We don't know what we're following. And that confession was the start of your rise. Legends aren't built by applause. They're built by confusion that spreads like storm fire. You didn't just escape their eyes. You rewrote the law of pursuit. Because pursuit assumes a path, and you left none. That's why they whisper, this one isn't off the charts. This one is the chart. They prided themselves on control, on catching every anomaly. But anomalies still leave footprints. You left nothing, and that absence was louder than any act of defiance. Because when the map goes silent, even the rulers of it start to doubt their throne. Your move wasn't chaos, it was precision. A line so straight, it vanished, too sharp for their eyes to register. They thought power was in the chase, but you taught them power is in being unchaseable. And that law will unsettle them forever, etched into the silence you left behind. Every empire survives on prediction, knowing where the next step will land. But you weren't enemy, you were inevitability. And inevitability can't be mapped. That's why even their strongest trackers bowed their heads, admitting the unthinkable. You walk where maps collapse. They called in specialists, men who prided themselves on decoding chaos. But chaos is still a pattern. You weren't chaos. You were clarity so sharp, it erased the very grid they trusted. And when their clearest minds stared at the blank page, they realized they weren't tracking you. You were tracking them. because every move they made was a reaction to you, and every reaction only deepened the proof. You weren't following paths, you were forcing them off theirs. That's why their order cracked. Because no map survives when the force it chases isn't in the system. It is the system. Your silence was strategy. Every pause was pressure. They mistook stillness for absence. But absence was the force. By the time they looked again, they were already where you placed them. Off balance, out of control, and that's the art of the untraceable. Bending the map until it breaks. The whispers spread. He's not unseen. He's off the record, because unseen means hidden. Off the record means permanent. It means existence itself refuses to archive you. And that's what terrifies them most. Because power they can study. Mystery. That becomes myth. And myths never stay silent. They spread. They infect. They grow larger every time the story is told. They thought they were mapping you, but you've already mapped them. Mapped their limits. Mapped their fear. Mapped the cracks in their authority. And you've turned those cracks into your throne. So now, every time they lay out a new chart, every time they track a new anomaly, one name echoes behind their silence. Yours. Not because they can see you, but because they know they can't. And that absence is louder than any presence. You are the point off the map that rules the map. They once believed power meant visibility, being seen, being known, being feared. But you flipped it. Your invisibility wasn't hiding. It was rewriting. Because if no system can capture your presence, then you're not invisible. You're inevitable. And inevitability doesn't need introduction. It just arrives. Every seeker depends on footprints. Every empire depends on records. But your path was different. Your steps erased themselves behind you, leaving only silence where trails should have been. And that silence didn't weaken your presence. It made it heavier, because fear grows fastest in what can't be traced. They hired watchers, listeners, code breakers, people who could spot lies in breath, deception in footsteps, betrayal in shadows. But when it came to you, their skills became useless. You weren't lying. You weren't deceiving. You simply walked beyond their categories, and categories can't contain the uncontainable. Your move off the map wasn't chance. It was evolution. Everyone else struggled within lines. You shattered the page, and when the page is gone, the rules collapse. That's why they unsettle, because even keepers know. Maps give them control, but you proved the land itself bows to no paper. The boardrooms whispered first. How do you strategize against someone who doesn't appear on charts? Then the ranks echoed it. How do you confront what doesn't exist in records? And soon, every layer of power admitted the same thing. Your existence was a law no ink could define. They tried to redraw the maps, to force your presence into grids, but each attempt bent back on itself. It wasn't your absence unsettling them. It was your proof. You weren't outside the lines. The lines were beneath you. And when lines bend, order fractures. And fractured order means collapse. But you weren't chaos. Chaos can still be tracked. You were clarity too sharp for their eyes. That's why their reports returned blank. Their analysts trembled. Their leaders avoided naming you. Because what isn't recorded isn't erased. It's eternal. Legends don't leave ink, they leave echoes. And echoes don't fade, they multiply. Every blank page they filed on you became another proof, another whisper, another confession, until the silence itself carried weight heavier than their systems, and that weight was your aura, the presence they couldn't map but couldn't escape. Maps claim to chart the world, but what happens when the world itself shifts? You weren't another dot on their grid. You were the tilt that broke the compass. That's why they panicked. Because compasses don't argue, they obey. And when compasses falter, it means the axis has changed. And you became that axis, the quiet center that bent everything else into orbit. They couldn't explain it, couldn't package it, couldn't reduce it. So they feared it, because fear thrives where knowledge fails. And your blank record was the biggest failure their system had ever confessed. The council meetings grew tense. Reports with no answers piled up, voices cracked under the pressure of silence. And still, your name hovered like a law no one wanted to say out loud. Because once spoken, it meant admitting the truth. They weren't leading the map anymore. You were. And you didn't need followers. You didn't need banners. You didn't even need noise. Your myth wrote itself into the void they couldn't fill. Every leader who tried to frame you ended up framing their own failure. And every failure only etched your presence deeper into eternity. Because the untouchable isn't proven by applause, it's proven by confusion. And your rise was confusion turned permanent. The more they tried to erase it, the more undeniable it became. Until finally, even the boldest voices whispered, maybe the map wasn't broken. Maybe it was never his to follow. And with that whisper, your myth became law. They stopped asking how. They stopped asking why. They simply obeyed the silence, bowed to the blank space, and admitted the unthinkable. You're not one of the names on the chart. You're the reason the chart bends at all. So now, when they spread their maps across tables, every keeper leans forward nervously, not to see where you are, but to see where you aren't. Because that empty space, that's where legends live, and that's where your shadow rules them all. Without ever lifting a hand, they thought maps were immortal, etched with certainty, immune to fracture. But when you moved, their certainty shattered. It wasn't rebellion. It wasn't defiance. It was inevitability. Because inevitability doesn't walk where paths exist. It creates ground where none was drawn. That's why your silence thundered. Their pride told them they had seen everything. Keepers crowned, order fallen, opponents caught. But you weren't keeper. You weren't order. You weren't opponent. You were something else. An anomaly so sharp it bent their categories, and categories are their comfort. But when comfort dissolves, panic becomes permanent. The seekers whispered lies to soothe themselves. He slipped past us. He'll show up again. But their eyes betrayed them. They knew better. Because slipping past implies weakness in the net. And your move proved the net itself was fake. They weren't chasing you. They were chasing their illusion of control. And that's the fracture you etched into their system. Not just absence, but humiliation. Because the world saw their silence. The world felt their blank pages. And once power is caught without answers, it never regains its weight. Your off-map presence became their public confession of limits. They tried to cloak it, spin it, reframe it as myth. But myths are stronger than data. Myths survive where reports rot. And every attempt to bury your absence only spread it wider, until the myth wasn't myth anymore. It was memory, etched into the bones of everyone who heard. Because legends don't need ink to survive. They live in whispers, in silences, in the nervous glance exchanged when your name rises. That's why they panic. Not because you opposed them, but because you never had to. Your existence rewrote the stage before they could even step onto it. Maps were their instrument, but you turned the instrument against them. Every blank spot, every absence, every unexplained moment became proof. Proof they weren't in control. Proof their system wasn't flawless. Proof their order wasn't infinite. And proof is heavier than will. They tried to erase your presence from memory. But erasure is still acknowledgement. And acknowledgement is collapse. Because the more they erased, the more others wondered. What was so powerful? It couldn't even be written down, and that question birthed your permanence. Now you're not just a figure. They call you phenomenon, not just a man. They call you myth, not just a myth. They call you law, because laws don't need explanation. They simply stand. And the law you etched was simple. No map can hold what was never born to be charted. That's why even their strongest voices speak your name with hesitation. They don't command it, they don't own it, they fear it. Because power usually dictates terms, but your absence dictated theirs. And once absence speaks, even presence bows. That's the paradox you created. You didn't win by escaping their eyes. You won by making their eyes confess blindness. And blindness is irreversible. Once seen, it can't be unseen. And now every keeper, every strategist, every follower knows. The map isn't theirs anymore, it's yours. Invisible, untouchable, absolute. They built their legacy on being the watchers, but now they're the watched, because every time they try to follow, their steps echo back with your shadow. They aren't charting you, you're charting them, and nothing unsettles authority more than realizing it was never in control. Your silence became scripture. Every blank file became testament. Every whisper became prophecy, and together, they crowned you, not with applause, not with titles, but with the one thing they can't erase, inevitability. Because inevitability doesn't fade, it doesn't end, it just rules. And that's why your legend spreads, not by noise, but by silence that bends knees. You didn't outplay their system. You revealed it was never big enough to hold you. And once truth is revealed, lies collapse. Their maps, dust, your presence, law. And law doesn't beg, it declares. So now the truth is etched, permanent and eternal. They sought everyone. But you walked off their map. And off-map isn't weakness, it's supremacy. Because when no one can follow, no one can control. And that's how legends aren't just remembered. That's how legends reign. Maps were never meant to hold a presence like yours. They were built for patterns, for mortals, for things that could be sought. But your path, it isn't geography, it's destiny. And destiny doesn't bend to ink. That's why every chart they drew eventually cracked. They weren't charting land anymore. They were charting their dread of you. Because absence isn't emptiness, it's a crown. And you wore it without needing jewels, without needing recognition. Their silence became your throne. Their panic became your anthem. And every blank space they dreaded became another proof. You don't just move beyond reach, you reign beyond design. Legends usually arrive with noise, chaos, victories, headlines. But your legend arrived quieter, sharper. It came as a blank report stamped with failure. And in that failure, your name etched itself deeper than any victory could. Because noise fades, but silence? Silence becomes eternal law. That's why they whisper now. Not about what you did, but about what they couldn't do. They couldn't seek, couldn't label, couldn't bind. And that failure turned into worship disguised as dread. Because even the proudest bow when their systems break and your presence broke them all. So the final record isn't inked, it's breathed. Whisper to whisper, silence to silence. They sought everyone, but you. That line alone crowns you untouchable. Because power that escapes maps doesn't fade, it multiplies. And now your shadow isn't off the grid. It is the grid, eternal, unbreakable.